me set the stage for who's here and what this community represents. Within ChiefPricingOfficer.com, the Chief Pricing Officer designation isn't just a title, it's really a qualification. Every Chief Pricing Officer listed in the membership has been personally vetted by me, and I can verify all have at least 20 years of experience, multiple companies, multiple industries, and real accountability for the connective tissue that links pricing decisions to the C-suite. Others in the community are aspirational CPOs and general members, professionals who are eager to learn, share, advance, or maybe just satisfy a curiosity. And that's one of the most exciting features of this community. It comes through mentoring. Chief Pricing Officers can opt in to be mentors, offering direct guidance for anyone seeking insight, perspective, or encouragement. So if you're interested in mentorship, click on the mentorship prompt near the top of the homepage, and it will take you to those. It'll filter down the membership to those who are offering to be mentors. If you are a Chief Pricing Officer and interested in mentorship, we'll give you some information on that in just a moment. Everything we do here follows one simple theme: elevate and celebrate. We elevate by sharing what works from cross-functional alignment and pricing authority, and we celebrate by recognizing the people and ideas that move our profession forward. And because of that, we've enabled this chat capability. It's already led to tangible collaborations. Even one collaboration that you guys were involved in, it turned into a submission to the Wall Street Journal op-ed page. And it continues to spark new discussions on issues like staffing and leadership development. That's the power of connecting practitioners who actually live this stuff every day, and we really appreciate you. The library also keeps growing too. Podcasts from John Jettings on pricing talent, Gene Zellick on pricing law, and a variety of articles from members, including Brendan Hodge, Patrick Taylor, Lee McAdams, and Ryan Walter. Everyone here is invited to contribute and shape the collective voice of what is pricing leadership. Now, to make all of this work seamlessly, everything on ChiefPricingOfficer.com is supported by a real person. That person is named Bradley Christian, our administrator who monitors and moderates and provides concierge level support. So whether you want to publish or connect or simply find something, Brad is your go-to. You can contact him if you want to opt into membership or whatever directly at info@ChiefPricingOfficer.com. That's info@ChiefPricingOfficer.com. A few quick housekeeping items before we dive in. If you'd like to appear in the member chat, please, you have to have your profile known as public. And so please go to your account settings, scroll to the bottom, and click on Make Profile Public. And realize that that only makes you public to other members, never public to the public web. This session, for the sake of audio quality, we ask that everybody stay on mute. And if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand, in which we can then get you off of mute and ask that question. With that, let's get started. Our first theme here has to do around our origin stories. And I think we all identified and see eye to eye on the fact that we've all had different journeys to arrive at this point. So let's have one of our board members, Brendan Hodge, illustrate that through example. Brendan, what was your first exposure to pricing? And did you choose it or did it choose you?
Thanks, John. Yeah, I think everyone has a story about how they ended up in pricing because it's one of those things that does not have an established pipeline. It's not like lots of people are going to college to major in pricing studies and then working through their whole career in pricing. For me, the way that I ended up here is a little bit, as you said, of it choosing me. I'd kind of found my way from having been a classics major in college to working in analytics and databases, first at a chemical company and then at Dell Technologies. So I was doing a lot of reporting, some stuff related to their CRM, et cetera. And late one night, I found myself in my cube, and the person the next cube over was David Dewars, the gentleman in marketing. He was having some trouble with Excel, and I helped him fix his report he was working on. And a couple of weeks later, he came to me and said he had just been put in charge of a new software and peripherals pricing team They had to price 200,000 items weekly. They had 4 people to do it, and they were supposed to maintain a specific price position versus competitors like Newegg, Amazon, Office Depot, etc. And they also wanted to take price elasticity and margin and revenue targets into account. So they needed a database in order to have so few people price so many items, something that would go through and identify which items needed to move each week based on how that data changed. And he said, I hear you make good databases. You want to come build us a database? So my intro was that I didn't actually know anything about pricing, but I knew a certain amount about building tools for people around the Dell campus. So I came in and learned pricing on the job while building them their tool in order to price those products. And I really kind of fell in love with it. I was trying to learn as much as I could about the process because I had to build a good tool to support the team. They gave me a couple of product categories to price so that I wasn't just working on the tool, but was also using the tool. And it really fascinated me how it operated at that nexus of understanding the product, understanding the customer, and understanding what that product means to the customer. And it also really amazed me that seemingly small changes in price could have really big effects in terms of the metrics you were delivering, your revenue, your volume, your profitability, and that we could get a request of, hey, we need to hit this specific target, and we could go out there, adjust our pricing models, change some prices, and we could deliver more revenue, we could deliver more profitability, we could sell out a product that we had too much of, or we could stop selling something that we were short on while upping the profitability. So it really fascinated me, and I stuck with the team. I moved to a couple of other pricing teams there, and eventually managed a pricing team. Once I had been moving through those pricing teams at Dell for about 4 years, I made the other discovery, which is what turns sort of a job into a career, which is that 4 years and 4 roles in pricing at a recognizable company like Dell means that you start getting calls from recruiters saying, hey, we have this pricing role. Would you like to come to this other company? And that started me down the path to the other companies that I've worked at. I ended up going to Wendy's to start a pricing function there, following on a consulting engagement that McKinsey had done, where they set up a pricing function for Wendy's, and moved on through now on my fifth company leading pricing. So it's been a real road, but I think one of the lessons there from that intro is that you have to know something that's useful, but you don't necessarily need to be an expert in pricing starting out. You just have to be eager to learn and willing to lead where the rabbit hole goes.
Wow, a storied career. Any questions for Brendan? And hearing none, I've got one for you, Brendan. I also understand that you've done everything from pricing food to pricing dirt.
That is absolutely true. Yes. So, I mean, I started out there in technology at Dell. I did software and peripherals and then laptops. From there, I went to Wendy's and was their menu pricing manager. So, if you've paid more than 99 cents for a junior bacon cheeseburger, I have influenced your life. And I went from there to Scott's Miracle-Gro, where I did indeed price dirt as well as mulch and lawn fertilizer and grass seed, insect killer, all sorts of different things there, Roundup. And then from there, went into industrials. So from more consumer brands to business, priced tungsten carbide tools, and now resins that go into composites like engineered stone and fiberglass. So I think one of the clear lessons there is you really learn the tools of the pricing trade, and you learn to think flexibly about that kind of analysis and those kind of strategies. You can apply those in a lot of different sorts of companies. And the fact that you can go from technology to food to lawn and garden to industrials really underscores how flexible these strategies are.
Wow. A Renaissance man, but someone who I think is emblematic of most of the people we have on the phone here who have been able to go through and understand how pricing is that connective tissue within the enterprise. And with that, I'd like to move on. Thank you, Brendan. Move on to actually, given all of that, pricing, we're about elevating and celebrating. Let's talk about elevate. Elevating and defining the CPO as a strategic role. And to do that, let's talk to Lynn Gwynn. Lynn, what is the most misunderstood aspect of pricing at the executive level? And if I could pile on that and say, and then how do you explain the value of pricing leadership to the CEO or board?
And John, thanks for the question, and thanks for putting today's session together. This is a question, I work with a lot of boards, a lot of C-suites combined, presidents and vice presidents of businesses, and the misunderstanding of what pricing is capable of and the disconnect between what they view as pricing, regardless of whether it's a transactional pricing, whether it's just getting pricing execution done, and true strategic pricing, and how to bring strategic pricing to the level that they operate at across the boardroom and across the C-suite it's a communication. I spend a lot of hours with these teams just communicating what the expectations of a chief pricing officer and a truly established pricing function should deliver for their business. And one of the very first things that I always start with is saying and asking them, what is the connection of your pricing team to the strategy of your business? And if they don't immediately come back and say it's a strategic lever that I know that I have at my disposal, and here's how I use it, which is very rarely the answer. That's actually very rarely the answer. But if they don't come back with that immediately, then you go into the opportunity to expose them to what's possible if they actually deployed a true kind of all-encompassing commercial view of what strategic pricing could be in their business and what opportunities that could unlock in actually implementing their strategies into the marketplace, how they actually, whether they want to grow the business, whether they want to expand margins, whether they want to do both. And then also, what do they take into consideration? Most of them then follow up with, oh, well, my sales team is really telling me what my pricing should be in the marketplace. I said, well, that's an interesting thing, but I said the data set that a salesperson usually has is usually his or her deck of customers, not your entire population of customers and potential customers that you should be looking at as to what the value that you're delivering to those customers is, and then how you should be pricing it. So it then starts a conversation about how to move that to a higher level of understanding around the value that they could be creating and should be creating out of both their internal and external information, and I'm not going to say data, but just information that should be consumed into their pricing decisions. And then that leads into the question around, okay, who actually owns the pricing decision in your business? So it's a continual conversation oftentimes that you get around, and that's why I say it often. These are hours-long discussions because they get really in depth with these business leaders. And it oftentimes challenges some of the assumptions that they have around how a business should operate. And that's where it gets really, really interesting to keep driving that into the next level of understanding. And then the explanation around, you should be bringing all the knowledge that you have inside the business together. You should be bringing all the external knowledge and the competitive intelligence, the customer intelligence, et cetera, into that, and the value that you're bringing through your products and services. So it becomes an elevated discussion pretty quickly, and that's when it gets very interesting that most businesses are not there, and that's the opportunity, I think, that like ChiefPricingOfficer.com will expose hopefully over the next 5 to 10 years, that these businesses will really come to understand what the value of bringing people with the skills to understand that at a higher level, and then be able to implement it at at the level of execution that's necessary. So it's a great discussion. They're fun discussions, but to just really to probe with them and really to pull out of their heads what they think pricing is, and then to be able to communicate what pricing could be and should be in their organization. They're really engaging discussions. So I don't know if that answers in great detail what you want to, but I think it gets at the essence of a lot of these leadership teams don't actually still fully understand what's possible to bring true strategic pricing into their business.
Lynn, I saw that as highly insightful, and I'm hearing something in there that says that we, right? I heard a call to action for us to actually, I'm going to stop short of saying demand, but really encourage our leadership to sit down with us, and not in a conversation and not in a soundbite, but sit down with us and have a longer conversation about strategic pricing in order to establish really the importance and the value of what it is we're doing. Do I have that right?
That's correct. And the value to the entire organization, not just what we're doing, but the value to the entire organization.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Lynn at this point?
Thank you, John. This is Guillermo, and I have thank you for sharing that experience and that insights, thoughts on that, and resonate to me very, very deep. And I wanted you to ask the following question related to most of the strategic pricing roles in the organization, at least with my experience and the dialogue that I have with colleagues. We are in the middle of influencer, a support function, but at the end of the day, many people and the C-level in particular are looking after how to measure us. What are the outcomes? How and you explained that pretty well in your speech, where how we should be influencers, but we have an accountability mindset in place. How do you see that happening right now with the C-level? How they perceive the function, and how they propose to measure pricing success?
I would, I had the opportunity over very many years to address this with a lot of businesses internally. But the first thing that I always come to is this is a team sport, and you have to have a team to make the whole thing work. It's not any single individual that will drive it all. I mean, oftentimes there's a driver that you've got to have somebody that's the spokesperson, and that's really the that stands on the pedestal and say, we're going to do this, and here's how we're going to do it. You've got to have that, but it's a team sport. And I think actually how I have seen the most traction across multiple businesses gained is not necessarily shining a light on what the pricing function actually did, but actually then turning it back and shining a light across the organization and say, here's what the team accomplished. And if you do that, and I think if you don't try to be so self-rewarding, or shine the spotlight on yourself, but actually shine the spotlight on the rest of the team, the spotlight actually gets returned back. And that's something that is I've experienced over the years. That takes time to develop. Now, if you don't have time to, it depends on your runway of what exposure you need with that C-suite to really understand that. If you do need to shine some light on it, the easiest way is to put some of those metrics in place and say, here's what we said we wanted to do. Here's what we actually did. Here's the dollars, the volume, the margin, the profitability that was actually established. The metrics matter. So I'm not saying the metrics don't matter, but to be self-serving and saying that, I did this or my team did this, it can be viewed across the rest of the organization not as positively as if you turn it around and say, as a team, as a sales team, as a product line team, as as operations, like you don't, from a pricing side, you're not the one out there making the product or delivering the service. That's your supply chain team. That's your operations team. That's your sales team. you're a part of the team. And I think if you view that as a team win and you expose it and say, as a team, this is what we were able to accomplish, you really wind up and it actually elevates. This comes back to understanding from a chief pricing officer. It actually elevates the position that much more because it's not so much me, it's we.
Wow. Well said. There's a phrase that I like to use when asked, that is, we're out for glory, just not our own. And so it's great that Lynn, you were able to articulate it that way, that this is a team sport. And I think that's something very special about who our chief pricing officers are, because as I go through conversation after conversation, we know that we can't get by without making it a team sport. So thank you for that. And unless there's anybody who's going to be asking a question of Lynn.
Is his hand up?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Brian?
Hey, Lynn. Nice to meet you. My experience has all been in B2B industrial, and I've seen pricing in multiple functions. And I don't know, from your experience, is there one function where you see it to be most successful or not successful?
Yeah, I hear this question all the time too. I think this is one where it depends on the organization. I mean, that's a consultant answer. John's probably said that 1,000 times. It depends, but I think it depends on the organization, and it depends on the people and the decision structure that's established within that functional responsibility. Personally, I would prefer to see pricing as truly a CPO level that's reporting to whoever owns the P&L, whether that's the president or an executive vice president, but whoever owns the P&L, that actually to me is the most powerful. However, I mean, it works. I've seen it work really well in reporting through finance. I've seen it work well through a product line that wasn't as elevated. It becomes to me, it becomes a question of the organization and then the people. Now, the danger with it being the people that are in it, people change. And then if you change people, then you may not have the same, find a nice way to say it, but you may not have the same influence. I will say, maybe if you bring in somebody new, they may not have as much personal credibility within the organization to elevate that decision structure. So it's not a direct answer. I mean, I work in B2B, B2D, B2C, all these businesses. It really is organizational. If the role is elevated to a CPO level type role where there's direct responsibility either to a president or even to a chief commercial officer type role, then you will see the impact and usually the decision rights that go along with that, the authority, the responsibility that goes along with that come along, and it provides greater influence and usually better outcomes. Does that help, Brian?
Yeah, good. Actually, it kind of helps validate. I have very similar views. So yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Great. Okay, let's move on and talk a little bit of not just the role, but getting to the role. So for those that have 5 to 10 years of pricing experience, what should they be thinking about next? And what were the skills or experiences that most accelerated your path to senior leadership? And I asked that question of Lee McAdams. Lee?
Thanks, John. I think one of the things I heard recently, or I guess it wasn't all that recently, some while ago, someone say, every job is a sales job, right? To some extent, any job we have is a sales job. And as a pricing person, one of the things we have to think about is that a lot of times what we're swaying is influence, right? And we're trying to get influence within the organization. So we have to be thinking in those ways of how do I build that credibility with folks that I'm around, and how do I get it so that my influence can impact the decisions that we're making. The other piece is, I've heard John say, good pricing is connectedness, right? And that when things go well, you have the pricing creates this connective tissue throughout the organization. So as a pricing person, ensuring that you understand all of the different, cross-functional groups who you are working with, and that you can speak to them in your language, right? Ensuring that, speak to them in their language, right? So that you can understand how they operate and the metrics and the drivers that they're trying to push through with their business, so that you can then ensure that the end result that your customer is feeling from a price perspective ties back in to the overall experience that they're trying to build and create. So having that wherewithal and that understanding of how the business operates, how the team wants to work, and bringing that to the customer. And then when we're speaking with leaders, ensuring that we're also speaking in their language, right? All of us love this field and we're passionate about it. And we like to talk about elasticities and spend our time in spreadsheets and pieces like that. But understanding that when we're speaking to leaders, we're speaking to them in a common lexicon that they work within, and that we're able to help show them how we're creating that connectedness, rather than getting them down to the nuts and bolts of what we do, is a very important piece. I once had a time when I was speaking to a vice president, senior vice president, and I mentioned the Simpsons paradox. I strongly recommend you can avoid those types of conversations and keep it to pieces where folks are, you're all on that same wave, and you're able to create things in that fashion. So, having that connectedness, being able to, which helps you build that influence, and then being able to do things in the language that other people you're using, and the phrasing that they want, and the vision that they have, to me tends to be some of the biggest pieces to being able to get yourself to move forward and get your effectiveness to be reached at its full potential.
Lee, if you could help some of the ignorant here, what is the Simpsons paradox?
So the Simpsons paradox is, easy example is, if you take the impact of margin rate to a given category, right? Hey, we raised the margin rate by 200 basis points, which turned into $1,000, right? And you do that for each category. Then you add it up. If you do that same math at the total, the sum doesn't equal the way the math works at the total. So it's because it's about larger things. So if you move a big part of the business 2 basis points, and you move a small part of the business 100 basis points, when you do those, when you put them together, that total impact isn't the same as the sum of those two impacts.
Okay. Question for Lee. Any questions for Lee about developing in your career, or what to do next? And seeing no hands, I think we should probably then move on to what I think we've all been talking about here, and that is this notion of connected tissue, cross-functional reality, and how we actually can accomplish pricing in making that, or becoming that connective tissue. And for that, I'd like to move on to Mark Daffron. Mark, what is the hardest part about aligning pricing with other functions, and where does the conflict usually arise, and what do you do about it?
Sure. And first of all, thank you, Lee, because you could not have teed up this discussion any better. I was really hoping that's what you were going to say was the skills most needed to learn. Because that really is the heart of what it takes to be a pricing leader and not a pricing tactician. It's getting these cross-functional alignments. And it's very difficult. If you have not worked in, if you've worked in pricing for more than 5 years and you have not been referred to as sales prevention, then the sales team is just talking about you behind your back. There's always this internal strife between pricing and other organizations, or the other parts of the organization. And I think there's a few main reasons behind that. So number one, I think that inherently the organization doesn't tend to believe the impact that pricing strategy can have. They think that pricing is a tactical function. We have this product, we have to assign a price for it. We have this deal, we have to have somebody come in and tell me how much I can discount. And it's a very tactical day-to-day type of a mindset that the organization has for pricing. They don't look at pricing and say, better pricing can actually lead to better outcomes. And this is a really hard mindset for a lot of parts of the organization to get around. At one point in my career, I was working for a large farming industrial company, a manufacturer, and they were firmly ingrained in a cost plus mindset. The idea that we could do anything better than cost plus was almost like sacrilegious to this organization. And it came to a crossheads when I was hired to lead the pricing organization, and they came out with a new line of a replacement line for one of their products. And every single spec was better, but they had also designed out a lot of the cost. So with this cost plus mindset, the only logical outcome for pricing was going to come down to reflect the cost savings. And when I came in and said, no, every spec is better, this should be a higher priced product, it was like talking a different language. And there was not even a thought that it could possibly work, that having a higher price for a lower cost product would fly in the market. So everyone in the company decided that was going to be a disaster. But I fought and I got it through, and it ended up being a great success. The bin sold like crazy, and our margins were significantly higher. But getting over that resistance, because the way we've always done it was cost plus, and doing something different and better is just too hard to comprehend. So, and they didn't think the outcomes would be there. They never believed that we would get better outcomes by having a better pricing strategy. And I think that's usually the hardest part. And to get around that, I think there's two things we have to do. Number one, I'm from the state of Tennessee. One of our big heroes is Davy Crockett, and his saying was, make sure you're right and then go ahead and do it. In pricing, we got to be right. If we aren't right and we fail, we lose the trust of the organization, and we're going to have an uphill battle for anything else we want to try. So we have to really make sure that we know what we're doing. We have all the things like the Simpsons paradox that we don't talk to about in the board meetings. We do that behind the scenes, and we know exactly what we should expect with our pricing the best we possibly can. And then the next part of that is to work with the cross-functional teams. Make sure we understand their perspectives, understand why they have the resistance. It doesn't mean we're going to agree with them, we're going to change our approach, but we address their root causes of their concerns. We try to find ways to mitigate their concerns, or at least make them more comfortable that our new pricing strategies won't get in the way of those concerns. And through that combination of us building credibility by doing our homework to really know what we're talking about when we propose a new pricing strategy, and working with the cross-functional teams to understand their perspectives, their concerns, and try to address them as well as we can up front, I think that is how I've had the most success to get this cross-functional alignment and be able to get the pricing function really acting more strategically and less tactically.
Wow. Mark, thank you for that. That is great. And I will keep in mind the King of the Wild Frontier the next time that I am having these conversations. Are there any questions here for Mark and how he approached things? If not, what I'd like to do is take the same question, or a little different form of it, and go to Gail Kurtoglu, who, Gail, have you ever had to fight for pricing authority? Could you tell us a story about that?
Absolutely. The question that I would ask myself is, when have I not had to fight for pricing authority? And the answer is never. So, talking about fighting, don't worry, I'm not going to talk about Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson here, but I'm going to talk about fight or flight. So that automatic, involuntary, psychological, and physiological reaction to a perceived threat. The key word is perceived threat. Take the perceived threat away, you have no fight. So what I'm going to try to do right now is to impart upon you a 5-ingredient recipe that you can use to cook your own wonderful meal, to get to a place where you don't have to fight for pricing authority because you have taken the threat away. So let's start our journey. The first one is, every pricing journey is a change management initiative. So if we understand that, then we can come on the other side being very successful, making ourselves successful, as well as our whole team successful. So the first thing we want to do if you're leading a change management initiative is to perk up our ears. Let's hear from them. Where is the pain? Because if we cannot understand the pain, we cannot solve the pain. If we cannot solve the pain, we cannot be part of the solution, or we cannot be the solution. If we cannot be the solution, then we're in the other camp. Then we cannot take that perceived threat away. So that's the first ingredient in our wonderful meal of pricing. By listening to our team, and not just the pricing team, the whole cross-functional team, we're starting to this journey of creating fans, right? Creating people who appreciate us. The second one is showing success. And I'm talking about what my grandma would say to me, one step at a time. Let's eat the cake one slice at a time, and that would be a pilot. We need to put together a pilot to show success, to also take away another part of the threat, which is this perception of not invented here, or it's not going to work here. Okay, pricing can be great in fast moving consumer goods. Guess what? This is automotive parts. It's not going to work here, right? So we heard that so many times. Guess what? Everybody wants to be part of a winning team. So if we can show success, however small, even in a pilot, then we're painting that picture that we're not here to fight with you. We are part of the solution. We're the winning team. Come and join us. The third recipe will be to take the fear out. How do we take the fear out? Fear comes from, well, the fear of missing out, right? The FOMO. So that comes from the fear of losing something. That's something. What is that thing? We need to look at incentives. So not just pricing teams incentives, obviously. What is the sales incentives? What is the finance incentives? And all the other functional teams, marketing, supply chain, etc. Once we understand incentives, then we can potentially realign, throw away the incentives that are no longer working and changing them with incentives that would align with the pricing journey that we want to take, ideally very much in parallel with the leadership and what they would like to execute from a strategic standpoint. Now, after we align the incentives, that if people are still not changing, then it indicates, just like I think Lynn had mentioned, then we need to maybe take more drastic action, not ourselves, of course, with our entire board and the senior leadership team. Then comes my favorite, quantify, quantify, quantify. We need to quantify our success so that it shows that, it's not gray. It's black and white. And if we do X, the Y will come out of the other end. And that Y is increased margin, increased revenue, ideally both, and better perception in the market. And then finally, we come to the last ingredient, the fifth ingredient, and that's G and G. G is glitz and glory. That means publicize, publicize, publicize. Publicize the wins in any and all forums. Ideally, not just by yourself, but ideally with your cross-functional team. You want the sales leader to publicize your win. You want the leadership to bless and publicize the win, the supply chain leader, the marketing leader, so that we can continue to educate the team and be top of mind as that function that brings success. Not the one that is this perceived threat, but the one that allows the teams to win.
Wow. I saw a lot of nodding heads, Gail, as you went through that. My sense is that that particular recipe has been pretty successful for you throughout your career. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yes. And I think what resonated with me most was pilots and incentives. Pilots so that you're removing risk and people are less likely to say, okay, go ahead and try it. And then incentives to make sure that we're aligned with the outcome. And then celebrating. Well, of course, ChiefPricingOfficer.com is about elevating and celebrating, because I think that the great success that all of you are creating to be that connective tissue needs to be celebrated in a way that others can see it and we can speak as a single voice. So a shameless self-promotion on that one. So any other questions for Gail? I'm not seeing hands raised or people blurting. So let's move on. And we've talked about actually getting things done in the organizations that we're serving. And let's sort of project ourselves out, if you will, toward our retirement and look in the rearview mirror and ask the question, what legacy do we hope to leave in the pricing profession? And for that, I'm going to turn to Scott Green. Scott?
Sure. Well, good morning, everybody. Excuse me. Happy to have this chance. Excited about this community and this sharing forum that we have here. And when John presented some of these questions to the group, I looked and thought, well, this is a question that needs some gray hair and some long experience in. I thought this was a perfect one for me. And Mark, I'm in Tennessee as well, so I feel like I'll be sitting with a pipe and a rocking chair in my front porch in this part of the conversation. But legacy is such an interesting thing, and for some of us, we're on that backside of that career, and this is something that comes up and it's in our ear a little bit, all of us. And I think you see a number of people here with a lot of great experience, kind of doing. Functionally doing this and trying to provide this. I'll just briefly go through my career a little bit, because I think if you're on that rocking chair and you got to tell a little bit of a story. So I've been in this space obviously, but a long time, nearly 25 years. I've been touching pricing in various ways and leading pricing across companies like BP, Panduit, and Stanley Black Decker. I've done pricing projects and roles that affected and traveled to 70 some countries, deployed this across a lot of different businesses. I like to joke about it, but you kind of roll the sleeves back and there's some scars here along the way. And that's the value of pushing through when there was no mentor to tell you, hey, you ought to do this or that. So some of the conversation we're having around direction you go, there's nobody here to kind of be in your ear and tell you this is direction you ought to go, because it's a lonely person's game here in a number of these companies. So I'm excited about this CPO forum. I think the legacy sits somewhere in here, and why I just jumped on this when John created this. I think when I think of legacy, I think of people and mentoring people. It's always something I've done. It's excited to see some of the people I've touched over the years becoming directors and VPs of pricing and moving in their careers. Very excited about that. But I have this kind of, as they say, bee under my bonnet, if you will, in terms of we haven't made enough progress. I look back at what I like to leave some things behind and make sure what I did left a mark. Individual companies, the function, etc. And I think we're sitting in a moment in time where it's kind of a tipping point, because we've got AI and all this push now. Finally, people are waking up to AI. Some of us have been working on that for quite a while in some shape, matter, or form, but our data, our processes, our tools in these businesses are not in a place to leverage all of this. And I have a passion for people side of this and for the businesses to say this is a moment, a tipping point, an eat or be eaten moment, where if you don't accept and start to take this stuff on and drive forward, you could be one of those that's bought and never heard from again. Some of us have seen and heard of some of those companies along the way that are no longer in existence, and it's sad to see that those things weren't grabbed. So when I think of this, I think of how passionate I am about making sure that people around me and the businesses really grab onto this. Is difficult. I mean, Lynn and a number of people talked about leaders that supported you really well move on. The next leader in doesn't. Things start to fall apart. But we've got to, in my mind, what I'm passionate about, why I started Profit Drivers, my consulting business, that is to leverage people like ourselves and get more experience in the conversation with organizations to build the people side of this. So I'm very passionate about, let's pass on some of what we've learned and make sure that these are good strategic conversations, but there's also based on experience, and we're driving towards something. This isn't just something I want to take a paycheck on. It never has been. And I think this is a point in time where this function, the people in this room, talking to leaders, talking to investors, talking to whoever we can get in front of, universities, we've got to really shine a light on the value of this, the importance of it, and make this happen. It's we've all had our victories in this. I've had that, luckily, and some with some of the people in this room that have been a part of that. I want to continue that on. I want to bring the experience of what we do to more people. That's why I got involved and left kind of the corporate side and said, look, I'm going to get out and start trying to do this as an advisor, a consultant, an executor of these kind of capabilities. Because I think I'm so passionate about how important it is right now and the impact it can have. I think we all know that. But I think now's the time, and I there's hyperbole sometimes, but I genuinely believe that, if we can all elevate ourselves here in the next kind of 3 to 5 years and really make impacts, and we've got to get this message out. And I really want to applaud, John and the team, Bradley, for kind of pushing through. I think this is the kind of thing we need to do. We need to spend more time together and get out and talk to as many people as we can. But really appreciate this opportunity. Love hearing all these stories. So thanks for the time.
Scott, thank you. And the credibility that everybody on this call brings is fairly extraordinary. I mean, take a look around. You're talking about some of the greatest pricing leaders on earth today in the same room, being able to leave our mark and influence what is happening with the next generation is fantastic. And so it's quite inspirational, and thank you for that, Scott. Now let's close by flipping that around a little bit, and we're going to go to Ken Sowers, and I want to ask Ken, as you look back then, what is the one thing you know now that you wish you had known earlier, so that all of those that are coming up through the ranks right now could keep in mind as they go through their journey? Ken?
Yeah, thanks, John. Good to be here with all of you today. And in some ways, I think, the learning, the things that I wish I knew have kind of been summarized by this panel in many ways already this morning. So I think, top of mind is it's not good enough to be right and know what needs to be done to improve profitability of the business. You really need to get to know your stakeholders. You need to experience their world and understand their challenges. And many times that's the sales organization, but it could be the product team, the category management team, marketing, finance, but understanding their perspectives, as Lee was talking about, and making sure that you can relate to them in the most powerful way. Because at the end of the day, what's worked for me most is really winning the hearts and minds of those stakeholders. In most cases, that's the sales team, but it's cross-functional. It has to be all of those critical functions that play into this critically important process. So I think the thing that I've learned that I wish I knew in my very early days is to invest early and often in perspective sharing and change management. And I think, as both Lynn and Gail highlighted, also share those successes very broadly. I think tying it back to the question of legacy will be determined by how things get done and the impact that we have on the business.
Great, Ken. And so, Brett, we will be judged based on the legacy that we're leaving behind, and being able to be that connective tissue cross-functionally, being able to have the deep conversations, as Lynn was pointing out, and understanding that what we have is applicable across industries, but ultimately it's going to require us to create the relationships in order to be that connective tissue. Sort of pulls it all together. What I'd like to do now, given the audience and even the participants that have been talking, is there anything that this group is or should be doing? Are there any questions that are lingering out there about this community and what we should be doing together, either as a single voice or as individuals trying to solve something to share with others? Are there any questions or insights around what we do at ChiefPricingOfficer.com? Well, guys, I'm going to throw one out to the group for you then. We did submit as I mentioned earlier, an op-ed to the Wall Street Journal that they didn't pick up on. And the reason for them not picking up on it, it seemed to be as us being able to say something that was new or otherwise, I don't want to say controversial, but highly impactful to what the business community would be reading. Are there other things out there that we should be I'm sorry, the op-ed itself, if you were reading out on the chat, had to do with AI and how AI ultimately came back to the notion of thinking about it as being the most enthusiastic and the most enthusiastic intern that you've ever had. And if it's the most enthusiastic intern that you've ever had, that means that will work 24/7. It will produce all the things that you want to, but it does not have the kind of experience necessary in order to provide insight or to create relationships. Therefore, when we think about how AI is going to be helping pricing, it's great that it can amass a lot of information, but ultimately in the B2B realm, the human factor is going to prevail, at least for the longer term. Wall Street Journal didn't pick up on that. And I'm wondering, as we've heard people talk about being the connective tissue and not want to shine a light on ourselves, are there any ideas out there on things we can pursue where we can get attention and start elevating as a single voice who we are in the marketplace? Are there thoughts out there?
John, I have this idea where I'm following this forum called Quoted, just like you would be quoted for something. If I can find the right, because there's a lot of authors or journalists who are putting together an article, but they want to quote someone to be credible. So if I come across the right opportunity, I will ping you so that you can give a quote. Obviously, it has to be an article in a newspaper or a magazine that is reputable, but I will keep my eyes out for this. It could be a good opportunity.
That would be great. Any of the folks that would like to provide input that have been on the call and would like to ask a question? We have a few minutes left. Anyone? Or would they want to add to this conversation?
Hey, John, I would add a little bit on that too. I think there is a sense, and particularly when you get into the executive levels, there's a sense of it's actually a reticent that they don't want to talk so much about their pricing impact because it impacts their customers, and they have a reluctance to actually voice that. And I think that may come through even on the Wall Street Journal side of why they don't want to pick these things up, is because they're picking up so much advertising dollars as well, and all the stories on AI and energy companies that are, the big deals that are being done and the billions and billions of dollars that at some point are going to have a return on invested capital. And that doesn't happen without people that do the things like we do to figure out how to make money out of it. And it's an area that the human investment that is necessary is not talked about nearly as much as the dollar investment is. And that human investment is what we bring to it to make the dollar investments pay off. And I think that's another way that hasn't been approached as much as it should be, because so much focus goes to pure executive teams and not as much to the people that really figure out how the hell to make it happen. And that's what we do.
Yes.
Lynn, that's a great point too. Of pricing is one of those things that will get praise and credit in a internal town hall, but it will not get praise and credit on an external, readout to the street. Because I think inherently customers, people naturally assume that when a company says we've had pricing wins, it somehow means the customer has lost. When in actuality, it could be completely different than that, right? I mean, if you look at the popcorn example, to me is still the best one, right? If you offer a small popcorn at $5 and you offer a large popcorn at $10, most of your sales go to the small because everybody says, I can't eat the large. All you have to do is introduce a medium at $8.50 and your large sells 80% of your sales now. The customer was never hurt in that. It was just we found a new way to package the offering. And so I think, getting companies to be able to feel okay to say, we had a win in pricing that wasn't a loss for our customer would be something that, would potentially shift the narrative a little bit.
That's
And
a
do you
great
think,
point, Lee. I was working at a company once, and through a pricing initiative that I had worked on, I was able that year to account for about 85% of our year-over-year EBITDA growth with just the pricing action, and it showed up in our reports as a footnote.
So I'm still wondering, and guys, I'm going to be struggling with this because, quite frankly, that's the charter of why we've put this together is how is it then that we elevate ourselves, given that, Lynn, to your point, talking about the human side or the human investment in getting this done is that much more difficult than talking about the something that's a bit more quantitative in nature. So to the extent, guys, that you can help and say, you know what, I think I've got a way in that is going to allow us to elevate as a group, that would be great. Speaking with the job market in terms of talking with executive search firms, the notion of chief pricing officer itself, a search was done by an executive search firm who came back and said, I think there might be about 150 of us who actually hold that title. Although we know that everybody on this call actually does what it is a chief pricing officer does. And it is that connective tissue, and it is that C-suite, and it is that credibility and all of the analytics, and it is full line of sight into going from product all the way through to customer or client. And so again, to compliment you guys, but then to take a step back and say, that's all great, and we celebrate that among ourselves. How do we elevate that in other areas?
John, one of the things I think we talked about at the board level in one of our meetings, I'm not sure everybody was on that's on this call, but I think of looking at other success cases in areas not exactly like ours, but like DEI and other programs were kind of successful because they were pushed for at the investor level. And then kind of creating a pull. So if we have the investors asking the executive boards, where's pricing in your organization? Do you have a CPO prepping them to ask the right questions of organizations, of executive boards? Could be a powerful tool for us to try to say, look, one, there should be this role, and two, you should be seeing these things and you should be asking these kind of questions. And these are not the high level, did we get that tariff, net effect of the tariff? There should be other questions that we can prep them and answer. I think it's about people asking the right questions. And I think there's a model out there of a number of functions that kind of were created in a similar path. It's like, well, let's just do that. It's not an easy thing to say. It's easier to said than done, I think. But I think there's some people here and a number of us that could start to try to form that. I think we should try to reach out to create some of that capability. That could be done at the investor level. That could also be done. Lynn's role in these executive boards is exactly this. These are the things you should be asking for. These are the things you should be doing. I think there's a pull needed. We can push up really hard. We can create mentorship, and there's some good things that we're talking about teaching people the influence piece, because I think that's in this space we're in. There's a lot of people with all the technical skills and have done it and grind it out and executed it, but getting the influencing skill in there is just, something you have to learn and do, but there's some mentorship here. So I think we can do some push up. I think we need a real strong pull. I'd like to go after that. Might take us a while, but if we could, as either groups or small groups within that, start a path that way, I think we would have more success in elevating actually getting chief pricing officer on board. I don't think the newspapers are going to jump on that to lead that. I think investors are going to lead that. Then with a bit of momentum and the right PR, we can, I think, be pushing articles and pushing this a bit more. So that's just my view.
Scott, just on that, I think this is one area where, from what I'm seeing, private equity actually gets exactly what you're saying. They actually get it. And at the board level, coming down, they get it. And it's what I find interesting is that in some of the larger, even public companies, why they're not.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's to exactly to your point, I mean, but those private equity boards and they get this is where there's huge opportunity for our businesses to grow. We've got to we have to invest to get these dollars. And oh, by the way, because they're thinking on multiples of the earnings that are going to be created, they don't just think in the current year on the current budget. What's that actually going to be from an expense standpoint or a capital investment standpoint? They're thinking in dollars to the future.
Outstanding. Well, I think you've provided the spark necessary to move in a particular direction. So for those of you that check up on the chat, I'm going to put this one out on the chat and see if we can get some response to it, because it sounds like there's an opportunity to actually elevate and celebrate through the channel that you've just described. So thank you for that. I know that we've now bled over into the top of the hour, and I want to thank everybody for coming together. I think that this was super productive. It's going to take a number of days, perhaps a week, for us to go through post-production, but this is going to turn into a podcast. Appreciate the help of all of the board and all of the participants who have been here this morning. Guys, elevate and celebrate pricing. We'll be talking to you soon. Thanks, everyone. Take care.